Hey guys, welcome to another Coach Adams Bikini TV. Today we are going over the Arnold Classic. So the cool thing about this year's Arnold Classic is a lot of the competitors were the top 10 competitors at the Olympia. So I do think there's going to be some changes up. I think some people have some retribution on their mind. I think they're going after it and they're trying to climb into that #1 spot. There's some exciting things that are going to happen. So I'm going to place these girls 10 through 1 of what I think is going to happen at the Arnold Classic here. So let's jump right into it. So battling it out for that 9th and 10th spot, I have India, Paulino, and Ukachi. And now I don't know a lot about Ukachi. You guys are probably saying, who is Ukachi? I don't know who she is. How did she get into the Arnold Classic? Well, cool thing about the Arnold is that if you win the Arnold as an amateur and you win the overall and get your pro card there, highly likely you're going to get that invite for the next year to the Bikini International. So something cool. They've been doing that for years, kind of like a nice little bonus and a good incentive for you guys to compete there and get your pro card because you're likely to get into the Arnold the next year. I think that it was like an auto invite at one point. I don't know if it's still that way. So that's why probably a lot of you aren't familiar with who she is, but she did win the Arnold Amateur. That's where she got her pro card. And I tried to do some research on her. There's not a lot of information out there. This does look like it's her pro debut, unless she's competed overseas and it just wasn't recorded on the NPC News Online. But as of now, the only thing I can find is her competition. This looks like it's her pro debut. So, I mean, what a crazy first show to do, which is the second biggest show in the world, under the Olympia, right? So awesome for experience for her. Really good lines. I'm going to go into her physique, but one of the things about competing, you'll see some girls just kind of need momentum when they're competing as a pro. It's like they just need some time to get noticed by the judges and to get in the judges' eyes, for the judges to kind of like recognize them and see who they are and see, okay, that girl, she's making improvements, like we said. But one of the best ways to get noticed by the judges is being in the Arnold. I mean, you're going to be like, think about it. We're talking about her right now. Everyone knows who she is. So she went from being a pro that kind of no one really knew about because she just got her pro card, so now everyone's talking about her. So I think that's awesome. Great way for her to jump into it strategically. Really smart decision for her to jump into this if it is her first show or as a pro debut, because everyone's going to be talking about her. She's going to be compared against the best in the world. When she walks away from this show, she's going to know exactly what she needs to work on because she got to sit next to, India and Laura Lee and Ashley and Jennifer and all them. And she can say, oh, this is where I clearly need to work on because I was standing right next to them. And here's my pictures next to them. So it's going to be a great tool for her. And I'll do an analysis after the Arnold, after that, and we'll see exactly where she's at. So a lot of you are probably saying, man, you're having India battling it out with a rookie for 10th place. That's pretty harsh. Well, it would be harsh if these competitors weren't these competitors. You got to understand, out of the competitors that are on this list, most of them just placed higher than India at the Olympia. Unfortunately, India ended up in the 16th place spot. Now, 16th place is basically anyone past 15th place is tied for 16th. They don't rank them after 16th. So we don't know India's true placing, but we call it the Sea of 16. Everyone wants to get out of the Sea of 16. Unfortunately, at the Olympia, India ended up in the Sea of 16, so we don't know her true placing. And the rest of the girls on the list finished a little bit higher than her. And so just naturally, just because the Olympia just happened, it is likely she's going to be ending up placing below these other competitors. Now, when I am looking at India on stage at the Olympia, I do think she could have been a little bit tighter. So there's some things that she can work on to make improvements and maybe potentially beat some of the girls that were ahead of her at the Olympia. And I hope she does. She's a great competitor. She's a legend. And I hope that she can, move up a couple spots at this Arnold. But conditioning wise, I do think she needs to be a little bit tighter in her core. Her waistline does not look as tight as it could be. I think that even in her legs, she could be a little bit tighter and just showing her conditioning just a hair. It's not far off, but a little bit tighter would be helpful for her physique, in my opinion, on at her showing going into the Arnold. But comparing her now, here's the thing. India at these big shows, India, it's no sweat for her. When she's on stage, she lights up. She's one of the best posers there is. I mean, when she does her walk back and her walk forward, I mean, she pretty much owns that stage. She's really, really good at stage presence. And I think that that's where she's going to be able to dominate when you have a rookie making their pro debut at a huge show with a huge audience, lights and glam and all this. It's a lot of pressure as your pro debut. So I do think when you look at overall physique, that India should be placing higher, and she's going to end up being in that 9th spot. And I do think that she'll be in that 10th spot. But then when you look at the backside, this is where things kind of go. From the front and the overall lines and balance, I do have India placing higher there. I have her at 9th over Ukachi. But from the back, I actually have Ukachi placing higher than India. So this is going to be one of those classic front-back scenarios. But I do think that if India was able to bring in her conditioning, she would be able to dominate her in both areas. But when you look at the overall conditioning and you look at the overall tie-ins on Ukachi, so let's take a look at those deep tie-ins. You look at India, deep tie-ins here too. The only difference is you're starting to see a little bit of hamstring separation out of India here. When you look at that detail, the hamstrings are starting to separate, starting to get those piano string hamstrings where you're getting some of that separation between the judges don't want to see the separation lines. And you are getting a little bit of that deeper V in that adductor too, which you're not seeing so much with Ukachi. You're seeing a little bit of the detail, but you're not seeing the actual prominence of the muscle starting to go this way. If you look closely, you can start seeing that pop out of the adductors here, and the judges don't want to necessarily see that. But if you see on Ukachi, she doesn't have that detail and that inner adductor that is going to be kind of a tapering in, where we call that like ice cream cone taper to the leg, right? Where you're getting that kind of more width to the abductors. So from the backside, I do have Ukachi winning in both detail and in balance and proportion, and also not having the deep V in the abductor. So I do think that that's going to be something that India can maybe fix with her posing. That could be potentially just her development. Maybe she's pushing really hard to get these hamstrings or to get these glute tie-ins to show, and that's causing the hamstring separation, causing that piano, we call the piano string hamstring cords, right? So you don't want to see that separation detail lines between the hamstrings. And so that's a little bit of the things I think hurts her from the back pose. The tie-ins are great. The glute fullness is great. The shape is there. But yeah, so when you look at both of them from the backside, it is quite a bit better, at least from the lower body on Ukachi to India. When you look at the upper body, India actually wins on having like better rear delts, better V taper. But I do think that with Ukachi, she's pinching a little too hard in her back pose. And if she just opened up a little bit and just showed a little bit of width on her shoulders, she would be able to match India on that backside, maybe even be better than her. I'm not sure. But she's already beating her from the lower body. So if she just matched close to the upper body, she could beat her from the back. And then if India comes in, this conditioned again, I do think actually she would end up being in that 10 spot next to Ukachi. If Ukachi, of course, fine-tuned her posing and whatnot too. So that's going to be an interesting one. It would be awesome for her to finish in 9th place. Of course, I'm wanting the legends to place as high as they can for as long as they can. So I'd love to see India in that top 5. But she's going to need to put some work in to do that. It's going to be a really hard battle to climb against some of these pros that just finished against her a lot higher at the Olympia. Now, battling it out for 6th, 7th, and 8th place, I have Romina, Ivana, and Ellie. And this is going to be a tough one. You could see, it's funny, right when I pulled these pictures up, how tough this battle is going to be. It is really hard to decipher who is going to be the better competitor out of these three. This is a really tough one when you're looking at them closely. Now, looking at their recent Olympia placings, you had Romina at 10th place, Ivana at 13th, and Ellie at 14th place. So again, splitting hairs here on who's going to be the better competitor on this day. Now, I think this one is going to be a little controversial on what I think based on the placings at the Olympia. I do think that Ivana is going to be the leader of the pack out of these three. Ivana, I don't know why at the Olympia she placed under them, but Ivana had a ton of momentum the whole year. She really did bring a good package to the Olympia, but it wasn't her best package of the year. You know, I do think that when you look at them right next to each other, Ivana's shoulders could be just a little bit better. Maybe she lost her pump backstage. It was a really long prejudging. I don't know what the case was there, but I've seen her with better shoulders than this, and that would help her overall balance and symmetry quite a bit. And I think that's where she gets hurt next to Ellie and Romina. But I think if she's brought her shoulders the way I've seen her bring her shoulders before and pose her shoulders the way I've seen her pose her shoulders before, that she could move up and place in that 6th spot here at this show. I don't think she's going to have enough time to make the improvements to hit in that top 5. I could be wrong, but I think looking at the Olympia and looking at the placings, you would look at this and be like, oh, she's going to probably take that 8th place. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that what's going to happen with this one is she's going to step up. She's not going to get cold backstage. She's going to know exactly when she's going on. She's going to get a good pump in her shoulders, and she's going to be there. I do think that there's a couple things she could work on, and this wasn't her best look. So that being said, The way I would have this, the way that I would think it's going to go, I do think Ivana is going to end up in that 6th spot. I think Romina will be in that 7th spot and Ellie will be in that 8th spot. It's really hard to go between these three. I think honestly, there's not going to be, you can place them in any specific order and no one is going to argue with it. There's an argument for all of them. You know, Ellie brings in that super tight conditioning, that tiny waist and great shoulder to waist ratio. Ivana brings in a super full bubbly package, but the balance is a little bit off at the Olympia. So if she needs to pose for balance, open up her shoulders a tiny bit, or just get her pump as she usually does, maybe she missed something with her fullness. Maybe she just cooled off backstage because she was backstage for an hour. Remember, there was 55 bikini competitors at the Olympia, and keeping your pump going for that long when people are doing their routine, she could have gotten off on her timing. I don't know the scenario. I just know that she's looked better before. So just depends. And you look at Romina, she's very balanced. She's very much out of these three. If you looked at like what the bikini competitor would be on paper in terms of muscularity, conditioning, she fits right in the middle. You see that Ellie's going to be the tightest. Romina's kind of in the middle between these three. And you look at muscularity, Romina's in between these three. She does fit her balance from upper to lower body. So this depends. It really depends on what Ivana brings to the table to see if she can move up a spot on Romina. But if she brings this same package, I do think it'll finish with Romina being in that 6th spot, Ivana in the 7th, and Ellie in the 3rd. So going into the backside, things are a little bit more evident on why I think Ivana is going to be in that 6th spot over these three. So let's go into it in detail, because from the front side, I will admit it's very difficult and all three can be interchanged pretty easily, you know? So, but from the back, I do think it's a little bit more clear. And actually, even at the Olympia, I thought it was a little more clear too. And I do think that Ivana and Romina could have switched spots at the Olympia, and it would have been a fair shot. So let's go ahead and go into it. So this is where it becomes a lot more obvious. Now, when we look at Ellie, Ellie is always the conditioning queen. She always is. She's pretty much as tight as you can get in bikini. You really can't get much tighter than her. But the only problem is in these days in bikini, they want you tight, but they don't want you overly conditioned. And when you start showing adductors like this, and when we talked about those hamstring cords, the piano string hamstring cords, right? We talked about, that's really, really pushing it, you know? And honestly, if she's doing this next to India and India brought her conditioning like she did at the last one, she might even place higher than her since it's a smaller show and she can be compared directly. This is overly conditioned for a bikini competitor. So looking at just look at that detail on those hamstrings and those adductors. It's a lot of detail. That's definitely something that a top judge like Sandy or Tyler are going to see, and they're going to knock her down for that. So that's one way she can move up in the ranks, and it's also one way she can move down. If she's pushing that hard to get those tie-ins to maybe show up a little bit better, but it's causing all this, the exchange isn't worth it. So if you're a competitor out there and you have to push really, really hard to get your tie-ins to show, but then all of a sudden your hamstrings, you're getting those piano string hamstring cords, the deep adductor, the deep V, just know the exchange isn't worth it. It might be cool on Instagram, but when you're talking about these big shows, like on Arnold and Olympia, it's going to knock you down in points. It's going to knock you down from the first placing rankings, right? Maybe at a smaller show where she's better everywhere else from everyone, that might work at a smaller show and she'll get qualified for the Olympia again. But once you get next to the top girls and you have all of this showing, it's going to knock you down. Now, looking at Ivana, let's go ahead and look at the contrast between these two. When you look at Ivana, she doesn't have those deep adductors. Remember we talked about with India where she had a lot of development on this inner hamstring, this inner adductor. Ivana doesn't have too much of that. She's got a little bit of it. You can see a little bit, but if you look on this left side, it's almost just straight up, right? There's development there, but it's not like a popping in rounding of that adductor, right? And if you look at these girls who are placing higher than India, you see all of them don't have that inner thigh adductor that is popping in and kind of coming in, right? Almost like if you look at a quad sweep from the outside and you look on the outside, they have that on the inside, right? They don't have that. And so that's the thing that you're going to look for in bikini. You don't want that deep development on those inner thighs. So when we look at the backside though, and this is why I have Ivana placing higher than Romina, we look at the backside, we look at that tie-in, when we're looking for a deep tie-in, but not an etched tie-in, we're looking for like basically as close as you can get to a full etched tie-in without being a full etched tie-in in today's bikini. She is fitting that criteria a little better. Now, I do think sometimes they push that criteria too much and they're asking a lot out of bikini girls in that deep etched tie-in, which is something that is relatively new. A lot of times they're saying, no, we're not asking for more, but they're clearly asking for more over the last few years in that deep etched tie-in, right? You're seeing a lot more of it these days. You know, you could look at how Issa's placing without having them when she won the Olympia to now the requirements having that and her being placed a lot lower because she doesn't. This is pretty much the criteria, what you're seeing a lot more. And I do think Romina can be a little bit better on that tie-in. And I don't think it's a conditioning thing. I think it's just a development thing. And she's going to need a little bit more overall muscle in that area to really move up the ranks. The other thing with Romina from this backside, I'm not a huge fan of the hair. Like, look at the contrast of the hair and her body. It's really, really close to her tan. So I do think when you're on stage and you have this dark black hair or dark brown hair, and you're having really good contrast, I do think that this contrast does hurt in just getting noticed by the judges. So that's something I think is a little bit of a miss from her too. Everywhere else, absolutely perfect. Shoulder width, tiny waistline, poppy glutes, good fullness of the upper glute, right? Roundness to the hamstring without any extreme detail, but a little bit more there because against a competitor like this, that's going to matter. That's going to be the difference. So I do think it will go Ivana, then Romina, then Ellie, unless Ellie can pose this differently and still have those tie-ins and that fullness because she could potentially beat all of them if she corrects that. So I do think that that's something that's hurting her. All right, guys. So now we are up to the 4th and 5th spots in bikini at the Arnold. This is going to be a tough one. This is going to be a controversial one again. And this is who I have in that battling it out for that 5th and 4th place. So we have none other than Team Elite Physique's Phoebe Hagen, right? And we also have Lee Chapatos. Now, everyone's probably saying, Lee Chapatos, like, there's no way she's going to be in that position. Well, remember, she finished 5th at the Olympia recently. So this one's going to be kind of a really strange one. We don't really know what we're going to get with Lee at the Arnold. Remember, Lee won the Arnold just last year. So what Lee are we going to see? That's what it comes down to. And I'm going to go into my analysis of this and go into where I think she's going to place at this show. Now, here's the thing with Lee. Lee can finish, I think, as low as 5th place, but as high as 1st. And I think that there's no one out there who's going to be able to know where exactly she can place on this list. Now, Lee has beaten every girl on the list competing at the Arnold at one point or another. Now, I think everyone can agree that Lee's look wasn't the best look that she's had at an Olympia. Now, the question becomes, okay, Lee was a little bit tight, a little bit flat, and the judges didn't like her for it. But the real question becomes, she was also really muscular, and I think that she brought herself in a little bit flat to deal with the muscularity, specifically in the glutes. You know, she got really big in the glutes, and compared to everyone else around her, that she was just overpowering in the glutes, even when she was flat. So how do you approach this? Is there enough time from the Olympia to the Arnold to bring that down and to bring her more into that bikini sculpted physique that she had at one time? Or is there not enough time? Or is coming in flat the answer to that? And I think just because the Olympia was so recent, there's not going to be enough time to make that correction. Now, there's still the variable, if she came in full, would she have done better? And that's possible that she would. You know, she's always been someone where originally they liked her a little bit softer. They liked her a lot fuller, a little softer. And she brought in a hard package. So was she docked down because she was too lean? Was she docked down because her glutes were so overpowering to everyone else's? What was the real reason she was docked down for that? Was it a combination of both? Was she just a little bit too flat? Like, I don't know what the reasoning for it was, but all I know is she went from potentially winning the Olympia this year that everyone was kind of thinking that she would win. I got probably more comments on my Olympia prediction video that I posted about her winning the Olympia than probably anyone else, even more than Jennifer, which is surprising because she was the reigning champion, right? So everyone, it's a weird variable. I think based on timeline, we're going to see something similar to her Olympia placing, which would have been in 4th place. But if she doesn't fix that, if she doesn't bring in her fullness, if she doesn't bring in a more sculpted bikini physique, and she brings a similar package that she did to the Olympia, maybe if she fills out and her glutes are super full and she's still too muscular for the division in the glute department, looking more wellness, I do think Phoebe can take that spot. I do think Phoebe can take that fourth spot and beat out Lee Chapatos if she does those things. Now, if Lee makes those corrections, I think she's going to finish anywhere between first and fourth place. So it's a really strange one for Lee. I think that's going to be the least predictable one out of all of them. But that's where I have both of them. Now, let's go ahead and look at their physique. Obviously, from the front, I mean, these are the top girls in the world. Phoebe finishing 7th, Lee finishing 5th. There's not a whole lot to nitpick here. Now, what I will say is that Lee wasn't at her best at the Olympia, but I will also say Phoebe, though she was the best she's ever been, after seeing her on the Olympia stage, I know we can have her better. She was a little bit flat in the arms. I know that we can get those a little bit better, a little bit fuller to match her lower body a little bit better. Remember, she's a tall girl. She's got a long torso, so we can fill out that muscle per square inch just a little bit better. I think my mistake with that was having her just a little bit undercarbed by a hair. And I think at this Arnold, we're not going to hold back on that and really go for the fullness for her. And that's also what the judges said. We could have had her just a little fuller. I don't know if it would have affected her placings at all. I don't know if she would have placed any higher. I think that at the Olympia, because she got a second call out and then worked her way up into that 7th position. Remember, the first call out was 8 people. She ended up working her way from the second call out up to 7th place. So you rarely see that. So the one thing is, I think at the Olympia, she was kind of on the judges' radar at that second call out. And then they saw her and they're like, oh, wow, maybe we should have had her in that first call out because she finished in a first call out placing. Now, for sure, she's on the judges' radar, and they are not going to miss her in a group of 10. So she's going to get a real look this time. Is she now on the trajectory of being better than Lee plus? Is she even someone that we're talking about in the top 3 this Arnold? It is entirely possible that you see Phoebe crawl into the top 3 this time. And what a shocker that would be, right? Because I do know that Phoebe is her best she's ever been. There's no doubt about that. We did a great job with her prep. She killed it. I'm super happy and proud of her for that. But I know she could be better than this, and I will promise you we're going to bring her in a little bit fuller and a little bit better than the last time you saw at the Olympia. So it might be a case of Lee's being a little bit better, but Phoebe's being a little bit better too, and that's just enough to edge her out. So it's going to be a very interesting one between those two because Phoebe is also someone who I currently have in that 4th placing, but I could see her going as high as 2nd place too. So we'll just see how it looks when she's 100% full. But I'll say this, I'm very excited about this one. This one is going to be an interesting Arnold. This is the most excited I've ever been for an Arnold because of all these factors that are going on. So good luck to both of those girls. I'm sure I'll be in contact with both of them for the Arnold. I hope Lee brings her best package. I hope Phoebe brings her best package, and the best woman win out of those two. But that one is going to be very exciting and very interesting. And now we go into the top 3, and I think there's no surprises here. Maureen, Jennifer, and Ashley, they just finished top 3 at the Olympia, and I think that it's going to be a similar placing between the Olympia and now. And again, it's because of the timing in between the show. And I do hope that the Olympia pushes back next year, back into maybe October like it used to be, because it gives you more time. It gives the girls a lot more time to get ready for the Arnold, to make these improvements from the Olympia to the Arnold. I mean, really, when you look at the Olympia date and then the Arnold date, there's really not that much time to make some big improvements. So when you see someone like Lee who needs to bring down her muscle a little bit, to bring in her fullness a little bit better because she was flat, I think that there's a lot more time there. So bringing in fullness, that's not hard. You just got to eat a little bit more for the show. But bringing down muscle, that's going to take you some time, So I don't think that it's going to dramatically change the placings between these 3 that much. Now, going into the Arnold, there are going to be some factors that we need to think about with the judging that happened at the Olympia, though, that could potentially change some things. So as we talked about before, Maureen is a little bit of a softer bikini pro, right? And at the Olympia, she was one of the softer girls to do well in the show. Out of the top 10, she was the softest in the top 10. I mean, really, she's probably the softest in the top 15 if you really look at them closely. So is that the direction that they're going for bikini? They're softening it up a little bit. I personally would like that. I think that that's great. I think the conditioning levels in bikini have gotten a little bit extreme with the fully etched tie-in for a lot of these girls. And I think that that's an awesome thing. It makes it more obtainable for people to do. Bikini should be hard to do, but not unobtainable for 99% of the population, right? So I do think if that's the direction they're going with the bikini division after the Olympia, and Olympia every year kind of sets the standard for the next year going into the competition season, and also the Arnold does as well. If they are trying to do that, there's going to be no one more ready for that than Maureen. So But a couple things with Maureen's physique. Here's the thing about Maureen winning the Olympia. Sometimes you'll have someone who wins the Olympia who's just like a dominant Olympian. You think of someone like a Ronnie Coleman, right? Like everyone was so far away from Ronnie Coleman. There was just no catching him. It was like, who's going to be in second is more interesting than who's going to be in first, because no one was going to touch Ronnie. He was just so far ahead of everyone, right? You don't have that in bikini. There's not a dominant bikini Olympia champion. The most dominant bikini Olympia champion we had was Ashley. And so she won 3 in a row, and that's been the most dominant there ever was. Now with Maureen, she's not an untouchable bikini pro, right? So if you look at the last time I saw someone who I thought was going to be a dominant champion was Issa, because from the front, she's uncatchable. Like you couldn't catch her from the front. It's like, okay, that girl's going to probably hold the throne for like 5 years because she's so much better than everyone from the front that it's not even like, it's like a Ronnie Coleman situation, right? So, but from the back, as the back started getting more etched and there started being more glutes, that you needed more glutes, you needed more tie-in, then Issa started placing lower because she wasn't able to keep up with the demands of bikini. But when you look at Maureen, it's not like she's so dominant from the front. She has some holes that people can catch up to her with. When you look at her from the back, she's not so dominant from the back where she's not untouchable, right? So that's the cool thing about bikini is that there isn't that dominant champion right now. So we're so lucky as fans of bikini that we get to see the top 3 battle it out again, and Laura Lee, who potentially can win the whole thing again, right? What an exciting Arnold this is. And that's one of the reasons I really like these top competitors competing more often. You know, as fans of the sport, we should be seeing our top pros compete more often. Who wants to see their top pro compete one time a year, right? I mean, how exciting is that to see your top pro competing one time a year? Imagine when you're watching Michael Jordan, you get to see him play one game. Sorry, no, you only get to play one game. That's all you get from him. Like, that's not very fun as a fan. How do you even remain a fan when you see someone compete one time a year, right? It's like, oh, I guess I just watch them on Instagram for the whole year and hope they peak at the show, right? So I'm really happy that Jennifer's jumping into a show again. I'm happy that Maureen's jumping into a show again. And they're not taking the bodybuilder route that was kind of set where they're competing once a year, which used to not be a thing. So as a fan of the sport, maybe you guys will disagree. Put it in the comments below. Like, do you want to see your top pros competing more often, like an Ashley, right? Where they can really engage and see her and go to your pro show that's in your state that year and watch your top pros, right? That's so much more exciting for a fan. So we're very lucky to see this again, this throwdown go again. And it could be all, jungled up between these 3. It could just go flip flop and who knows, because they're all so good. There could be a lot of things that can happen. Now let's go ahead and go into what needs to happen for these positions to switch. So first off, with Ashley, what does Ashley need to do to climb the ranks and beat Jennifer and beat Maureen? Well, as far as her conditioning goes, conditioning's perfect. As far as her backside goes, backside's perfect. Doesn't really need any more on the back. The only thing Ashley needs is a little bit fuller shoulders, a little bit fuller in the arms, maybe just a hair in that V-taper, maybe just a hair in the lats to be able to hang with Jennifer and a Maureen in the overall upper body width. From the lower body, to be honest, from the front pose, I actually have Ashley as the best balance, and I have her as the best bikini look, right? So that could be as soon as the Arnold, but again, the Olympia just happened, so Ashley coming in a lot fuller is not, super likely. Is she going to be a little bit fuller? Yes. I think she could have been a little bit fuller. One of the things I will say is that Ashley's Olympia look probably wasn't her best look of the year. The Arnold was probably her best look of the year in terms of her fullness and conditioning. So if she's able to bring that again, which I'm hoping that we do, she's ahead of her prep right now. If she's able to stay on that same trajectory and fill out 100% with the conditioning, you could potentially see Ashley winning another Arnold. Now, currently, Ashley has the most Arnold Classic championships out of anyone in the most countries. So can she get the Arnold again? It is possible, but it's going to take her coming in fuller, coming in just as conditioned, if not a little bit more conditioned with more fullness on that upper body. As of right now, I think that it's likely that we're going to get that. Will it be enough? I don't know. Going into Jennifer. Now, when we talk about Jennifer, remember, Jennifer changed her look a lot going from last year's Olympia to this year's Olympia. So she came in a lot tighter, and I don't think it was necessarily a plus on her physique. One of the things that was really apparent was that her lower body is a lot more dominant than her upper body. When she was softer and bringing in a softer look, it wasn't so apparent. So what does Jennifer need to do? Well, if I'm looking at Maureen and how Maureen's winning, I would probably just go back to my Olympia look that won the Olympia and won the Arnold Classic, where she was a little bit softer. You got to remember, she's never been this hard in her life. She's never been this hard. At any show you look at, she's never been this conditioned in her shoulders, in her core. And what happened was, I don't think that her legs got as small or as lean as her upper body did. People are saying, oh, it's her posing and whatnot. I'm looking at her posing. It's not that much different in her front pose. Now, it is a little bit, but when you look at her overall structure and you look at her overall leg size, it's a size issue. It's a size and maybe a conditioning issue. Potentially her legs didn't get as lean as her upper body. Maybe she leans out last on her legs. So she has two options, I think, based on the timeline that was from the Olympia. Option one, lean out even more and get your leg conditioning and size of your legs to match your upper body, which would mean basically pulling back on your legs entirely, doing a lot of cardio, staying in a deficit, and getting a little bit leaner than you were with the Olympia. Will that hurt you or will that help you? I don't know. It's a gamble either way. Going into the Olympia this lean and bringing that different of a look, I can tell you she's not afraid of gambling and bringing in something entirely different. So I give her props for that. But when you're the champion, I don't think you need to change that much. I think you bring the same look that you brought last year. Now, looking at Maureen and how soft Maureen is, I absolutely think that the strategic play here is to just come in a little bit softer, where you were doing better when you were softer and the current champion is softer than you. So why wouldn't that, you put those two together and just come in a little bit softer? You know, you look more balanced when you're softer. You know that you won major shows when you were softer, the Arnold and the Olympia. So why not go after that again, especially when potentially the change in Bikini is coming in a little bit softer and a little bit fuller. And we know absolutely Jennifer can come in softer and fuller than she did at the Olympia and look a little bit more balanced and probably look just a little bit more Bikini healthy too, with her coming in with a little bit of a fuller look. So that's going to be the difference. So it's not that I think Jennifer's going to be the variable here. She has two options, right? Come in a little bit softer, a little bit fuller, potentially take that spot back for Maureen. Come in harder and make herself just like how I talked about with Issa being unobtainable to reach, right? Because structurally, Jennifer's almost untouchable. So if she comes in tighter and has her balance there, she might be one of those dominant champions again and be the first Olympia champion to regain her title in Bikini, which would be super, super cool to see and put her on a good trajectory for the 2023 Olympia as being the champion. So we have some huge variables going on here. Is Laura Lee going to make those corrections and beat all three of these girls, which is entirely possible? Is Ashley going to come in fuller and regain the title and have huge momentum going into next year's or going into this year's Olympia now? Is Jennifer going to bring the look that she brought at last year's Olympia and come in softer to compete with Maureen's softness and fullness? And is that going to be better for her with having better balance in her physique and then set herself up for a 2024 recapturing the title? Is Maureen going to just bring this exact same look, which would be the strategic thing to do? And is that going to be enough if she does with the other variables? Is Phoebe being a little bit fuller going into this Arnold going to be enough to dethrone all of them? There's so many variables and so many things that can happen. This is why I think this is the most exciting Arnold that we've ever had, because name a time where you see the top three that were at the Olympia doing the Arnold just a couple months later, and someone who was potentially going to win the Arnold who had an off showing at the Olympia having a chance this quickly at Retribution, right? What a crazy, crazy Arnold. It makes this one super, super exciting. So if I'm Maureen's coach, I'm saying, hey, we just won the Olympia. Bring that. Change nothing because it won almost with the perfect score. Change nothing. When you're the champ, do not change anything. That's generally what, if it just won for you. Now, if it was a 1-point decision, maybe get a little bit right. But in the judge's eyes, most of them think you're perfect that way. Stay there, right? So anyway, that's what I got for you guys on this one. I think this is going to be an exciting Arnold. I'm going to be at the Arnold. Are you going to be at the Arnold? You better say hi to me if you are. Whether you like me or hate me, give me a picture with a thumbs down if you don't like me. That's fine. I'll see you guys there. Put in the comments below who you think is going to be in your top 10 in the top 10 order. This one's a little bit more predictable than the Olympia, but this one I think is more exciting than the Olympia. So let's do this and see you guys. We are 7 weeks out.